I
Yeah.
can't believe how much money some of these young kids have. I mean,
Mhm.
specifically, a kid was in here yesterday. He had $30,000 worth of cards in the box he brought in here to sell us. And
Yeah. Hey guys, welcome back to the business of ball cards. And I'm here with Ron Straisley from Sports Spot in Fort Wayne, Indiana. So how you doing today, Ron?
doing great, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you taking your time and being on here. So we'll get started just by like kind of having you introduce yourself and maybe how you went from collector to kind of, dealer.
Okay. Okay, name's Ron Stracely, like you said. Own Sports Spot since 1990 on Coliseum Boulevard in Fort Wayne, and collected as a kid and got back into it big like 1987, and was buying stuff unopened at that time. It was Donruss, Topps, Fleer, baseball mainly. And then as we approached 90, I went off to college, but as we approached 90, we were buying some of the basketball as Skybox, and that got hot and coming out with those new brands. And I had moved to Chicago after college. And this was like this shop was my dad's dream. He's just always been a collector of everything. He had old toys, he had baseball cards, he did coins, taught us all that as kids. But we so when I was up there, I just working and just all the driving and everything. I got sick of it in a while. My dad owned a strip mall here in town and had a tenant move out, so he approached me about coming back and opening up the store.
Oh, that is awesome. So 1990, believe it or not, that is about when I started collecting myself. I would have been about 14 in 1990, maybe slightly younger than that. And I definitely remember those 1990 Donruss and how they mass produced those. But yeah, that's a really long time. So since you've been in it so long, what would you say are two of the biggest trends that maybe surprised you, or you think have been like two of the biggest things that's really changed in the hobby over that time frame?
Well, it's really interesting because like I got to go lock my door here. Those guys just left, and I told you we're
Oh, okay. Yeah.
anyways. We started with Desert Storm, and that war broke like shortly after we opened, and that's kind of one of the first things in '91 that where things just got real hot. And I mean, it's crazy because packs were 50 cents, boxes were $18, and I remember Upper Deck coming out, and Upper Deck was like 99 cents a pack, and people just they frowned at it. And now they're paying $500, $1,000 a pack, and they're ripping them like crazy. But
Yeah.
so then, we went from that to Shaq coming out. Big thing was Shaq. And then we got into comic books early in the day. So we got to go through the death of Superman and all that. And the card market just kind of always sustained. It was up and down, up and down. We got into other things. Like I said, death of Superman, that was a big boom. And along came Beanie Babies. And we got big into that into the late 90s. And Pokemon started. So, I mean, we
Mhm.
had pallets of the first edition Pokemon, the basic Pokemon, Jungle, Fossil. Me and my buddy were
Wow.
buying stuff like crazy and wholesaling it. But who'd have thought you
Mhm.
hang on to one case of each? It just the stuff that has
Yeah.
passed through my hands in time. It's unbelievable. Okay, I'll continue. So we hit 2000. We got into '08 when everything started crashing. We were going to close our doors, and
Yeah.
it was big in the coin market, so we started buying and selling gold and silver, and that sustained us, all the way through about when COVID started, and this thing just exploded again, and we've been just running strong ever since.
Yeah, that's cool. So just a couple of things that you've, already touched on is I remember, like you're saying, those 89 upper deck packs coming out. And even then there started to be maybe 6 months or a year after like a secondary market. And I remember my dad buying me like a couple packs at $5. And I was just like, you can't be doing that. That's crazy. I felt like spoiled, that somebody buy a couple $5 packs for me. But yeah, and then you mentioned Beanie Babies, and I've been really honest and upfront, like on some of these other videos that I've done like this, that I actually filed bankruptcy. And one of the reasons I filed bankruptcy is I went really heavy into Beanie Babies. at the beginning when I first started my first shop, like in 2001, 2000, and that ended up like failing miserably. I used credit card debt to, I was only, in my mid 20s, early 20s. So
Yeah.
it failed. But yeah, Beanie Babies, I did okay with those for a while. So you kind of mentioned it. You touched on it a little bit. Your dad's influence
Yeah.
on you in this hobby. Do you got anything else to kind of share about that?
Oh, I mean, he was like I said, he was just a big collector of everything. And I remember when we opened, and I'm in the same location, and we are just busting at the walls now. But we had a 1,200 square foot shop, and everybody said we were going to go out of business because we had too much overhead. These things were just little holes in the
Yeah,
wall. But
yeah,
they decent rent at the time, and he had a partner on the shopping center, so of course I had to pay rent just like everybody else. But it was just I remember being young, and I had my rent, I had a car payment, and trying to run this place, and like I was broke as a joke, and just
yeah.
little by little, it just I remember thinking this was just never going to take off. So I had to do shows and stuff to supplement it at the time. And that just always helped with a little bit. But $200, $300 went a long way back then. If you had a $200 day, it was a day.
Yeah, that
Yep.
makes sense. So yeah, with my dad too, it was a hobby that it was really weird is neither of us were too into sports. My dad wasn't actually into sports, but he got into sports cards with me. And I still remember him pulling like a studio Albert Pujols rookie when me and him were opening something, in the early 2000 around in there range. And that was like a big deal. It was a big card then. It was like a $35 card, which was, at the time was a huge card. But during you talked about the COVID boom, and then I feel like it kind of settled down. Then we had this other resurgence. Are you seeing kind of like a generational pass down, like in your shop? Are you seeing like families coming together and that sort of thing?
That's one thing I think COVID did to where you stop seeing kids there for a while because they were getting out of it. But I
Yeah.
can't believe how much money some of these young kids have. I mean,
Mhm.
specifically, a kid was in here yesterday. He had $30,000 worth of cards in the box he brought in here to sell us. And
Yeah.
he wanted to keep this and that. And with kids, we always pay kids a ton. If we trade kids 100% of what we're going to get out of their young kids.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah.
If they buy it, we're 75, 80%, we will pay them, and just to get them more into it. But you go to these shows and that there's kids, families, it's a mom pushing stroller. It's really great. It's become a family thing again.
Yes, I agree. Do you feel like affordability is significant to kind of keeping families involved? And the reason I'm asking that question is there is like a flyer, it's like a meme going around, and in the meme they were suggesting that the middle class families were getting squeezed out. You still had your bargain guys, and then you had your big shot guys, but like the middle class was getting squeezed out. So do you think affordability is pretty significant for keeping middle class families involved?
I It's getting tough. I mean, you and I were just talking about what the new Chrome basketball got released at, and I know realize that you got to make money, but you got to leave some meat on the bone. And these families, there's just very few people, and a lot of the customers came in like when Chrome football came out, and we had to spend what did that cost us? $1,200 on the second round, and we had those boxes at $12.99, and people thought we were nuts. And we were just
Yes.
trying. Really, you put a credit card on that, we weren't making nothing, but we got a black eye on that because of the price. And
Yeah.
it's not us. It's not us doing that. We're just trying to maintain. And I'm telling you, I got those same boxes on the shelf for $7.99. I got $1,200, and that just cannot sustain. But I wish at least the paper products would stay cheaper than what they're still charging us on those. Something has
Yeah.
to make for people to buy.
Yes, I totally agree with you. And so I'll go with this next question. I know that in the beginning, shared with me, off camera, that in the beginning you were doing some odd jobs and that sort of thing. But I know even now you kind of have multiple streams of income coming in. And I've read personally, everybody has talked about rich dad, poor dad, and
Yeah.
that sort of thing. So how important do you think having other streams of income are into like kind of building a card business or specifically a card shop.
So ironically, I read that book, and it's like you were saying. I did start, and like I was landscaping in the mornings, coming at 10 o'clock. I'd get up 6, 7 o'clock in the morning to get started. To go do a landscape job for 3, 4 hours, and then start the shop, and then go finish that job at the end of the day. But now. The entry back then wasn't as bad. As soon as I opened in 1990, I got direct with Upper Deck, Fleer, Tops. They were all separate companies, and
Mhm.
we got direct with everybody but Hoops. That was Impel Marketing, and you had to go through like a broker to get that product. But as time went on, and then of course Panini Binary, we've always stayed direct, and now you might be able to get a Panini license, but you can't get with Fanatics anymore. And even if you buy a shop, I don't think you're guaranteed that licensing. It's just gotten that tough. So we're lucky to
Yes.
still have those direct accounts, but and really without those, you'd be hurting to start a bit. We had a guy actually locally tried starting one up, and he was
Mhm.
direct, and he didn't last long.
Wow. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, we kind of were talking about, the multiple streams of income, and then also you kind of talked about comic books and stuff. So you've got those other streams of income, like me, I actually have a pet sitting business on the side that when this was slow prior to COVID, it was really important. My wife still kind of helps manage that, but it's very part-time, and you've had these other things too. But what about actual like shop diversity? Like you said, the comic books and that sort of thing. How do you balance getting into these other things, but kind of keeping the main thing? Like a lot of people will talk about like a 80-20 principle or whatever. So have you had a hard time like just figuring out what to get into and how to keep, you know,
It's
everything else in order?
There was at one time my wife started this candle company in the early 2000s, and that really kind of sustained us there. And I got home, and she had the living room just loaded with all these boxes. I go, what is all? She goes, oh, these are my orders. I'm like, what is that product? So I started carrying
Mhm.
that product in my store, and it just exploded. We were doing more in candles than we were doing in cards. And then
Yeah.
that kind of cooked itself. It was really a shame. It was called Gold Canyon Candles, but it no longer exists. But they sold out. The new people ran it into the ground, disappeared. But nowadays there is so much in cards, and there's so much that you can. You got the UFC, the WWE, you got all the sports, and then you got the Disney, you got the Marvel. There's so much that you almost do not have room for anything else. You need places for
Mhm.
people to rip this stuff and everything else. So product diversity now is really it's not a necessity anymore.
Mhm.
Before I'm
Yeah.
a big
One company kind of tends to own most of the pie.
correct.
It's
Yeah,
kind of,
that's
yeah,
and I'd like to have seen Panini had good products. I would like to have seen licensing be shared because we're going to miss the national treasures, the prisms, and them type of products. They were fantastic products, but my
yes.
guy was in here. He was big during the Zion era, so I had a box of that prism from that era on the shelf, $6.99, and we were talking when them were $3,900 boxes. So he ripped
Mhm.
that. He did pretty good on it, but it's kind of neat.
Yeah.
It's a good product. Even what he broke down in there, at $3,500 he'd have got cooked, but at $6.99 he did okay.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. So, speaking of diversification, I don't know if you've seen this same trend. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. But for us, the gross sales definitely are still more in the sports card category. But if you start looking at individual sales, our Pokemon and TCG, like One Piece, is rivaling the sports card side. Can you kind of speak to what you've seen the last couple years on that side in your shop?
I hired a buddy of mine that retired police department, and he's fantastic. And he kept Ron, and we would carry Pokemon, just boxes, packs, and he wanted me to get into singles and everything. And I'm like, I don't know it. I don't want to learn it. I'm getting old. And so he did. He took it all over. He built our singles business in there. He's done very well with it. But still, we have such a hard time getting. We had direct accounts with Southern Hobby. All of a sudden, they just cut us out.
Yeah.
GTF had those direct accounts. They just then it was almost a pay to play type thing, and we just let all that go by the wayside. And not being able to buy Pokemon Direct has hurt. You know, we're very high priced when it comes out because I buy it on DealerNet, and you know how those
Mhm,
prices are, and that stuff you buy it right away to have it, and the next week it's cheaper, but you got to
mhm.
have it. Got to have it on opening day.
Yeah. Um, I totally agree with you. So, one of the big things a lot of shop owners, and I think we feel this maybe, particular, maybe there's some breakers that feel it about the same, but we feel some pressure from fanatics. So I'm just wondering, have you felt like some direct pressure from them? And how have you decided to navigate that as far as making changes, not making changes based on their suggestions?
You know, it's difficult. I mean, they want you on Fanatics Collect, and like we don't do that. And we did open the account. You know, they wanted you on there, but I'm it's difficult because you want to. We're buying everything. We're buying the supplies. We're buying product we don't need. We're just trying to keep 100% on our orders. And then one of the frustrating things, like I had company went to the lake on a Thursday. They offered a it was Marvel or Disney Chrome or something, which I would have bought, but I wasn't paying no attention to it. It expired right away on Friday. And I was always
Mhm.
watching Sunday night because Sunday nights is when a lot of it offers on Thursday, expires on Sunday night. So boom, missed that one, you know, and I'm frustrated with
Yeah.
myself. My percents are dropping, you know. So and so right away I go in and request more, you don't get it. But you know, it's they hold the ball, you know, and so it's
Yeah.
very difficult. There's always life is all about change, and this is where we're at right now, and that's what it
Yeah.
takes to play. But I would have to hire another person, and I'm three full-time guys, two part-time guys, and myself, but I'd almost have to
Wow.
hire somebody else in order to do the collect and all the other things they want to do.
Yes. No, I do agree with you. I know that, our shop in full disclosure is about 2,900 square feet. The location's a little flea markety looking. I mean, it really is. And I invested money, tore down some stuff. The space you see used to be storage. It's now open up. We do some YouTube stuff and even just breaks and stuff here. But it's been tough for me. Like there for a while, I just felt like everything they suggested I had to do, but I just, at the end of this like kind of expansion project here where we cleared off this storage space, I just was like, no, I'm not building their business. I'm building mine. And some stuff is just
Yeah.
not right for my location and stuff. So it has been interesting. And I think all of us shop owners have to kind of walk through that and
Well,
navigate that.
there's times we
So
franchisees, you know, and they're coming in and
yes.
a lot of things. But you know, like I said, they hold the cards. It's their product, and you know they hold everything to a very high standard. You know, you have to appreciate that. But I wish the prices weren't running as fast as they are because I think that's headed for disaster.
Yes, and so I will be fair. I will be fair to Fanatics. Some of what they've suggested, I've implemented, and I couldn't imagine doing it another way. Like they, it made sense. Like a lot of it was hour based. We were only open about 30 hours a week total. Now we're open 7 days a week. And so that decision actually, the market just filled out and filled those hours. And usually we stay pretty consistent. So, yeah, some of what they're recommending that we do is good and good for our business. But it's just kind of up to each individual owner, I guess. So this is a big one, that, kind of like I said, I titled this The Business of Ball Cards. And I'm thinking about how this one will be worded and it's two shop owners kind of communicating and talking. So in doing that, I'm kind of wondering if you have any advice or thoughts for someone who has shop dreams.
Have a lot of money. You know,
Mhm.
it. I mean, I started this thing on a shoestring, and my dad gave me a $20,000 loan, and that would go nowhere in today. And in today's money, that's a lot less money, of course. But I mean, I would think you would need a good couple 100,000 just to get that door open because you got to fill it with product. You got that first image for people. The first time they're stopping in, especially if there's local competition, you better be able to show them something neat. And otherwise, they're you know. And guys, build your collection, build a big collection, have a nice collection of singles you can put out, and that's
Mhm.
common.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, some of the people that come to me and have shop dreams, I'm just like, I don't know if you should have shop dreams. Let's bring this back to reality. And do you really know, you know, everything that you're, kind of getting into and that sort of thing? Because it is a lot, and it is a lot of money to
And to
scrap.
finish that, it just, the barrier to entry is huge now compared to, way back. Even when you got in, when I got in, it's a very big barrier to entry. So, guys, they're going to have to start with shows and build, and then most likely, probably the best thing to do is buy a business that's already up and running.
That's a very good idea, and I would agree with you, and maybe even pay them to hang on for about 6 months and give you some guidance along the
Sure,
way, and yeah,
absolutely.
I think that might be good. Um, but another thing, just to finish out that topic on my end, I know a lot of shops that have popped up in my area, and we've got guys, they're trying to do all the things, so like you said, they have somebody doing Whatnot and Fanatics Live, they have somebody just running the register a couple days a week. They have, all this stuff going on and they're not paying themselves. So I think that's something that, you have to try to balance is, making this expansion and growing and doing all these things you need to do, but you're one of the first people that you should be paying. It might take you a little while, but eventually you've got to get to where there's money in your pocket and you're not just building this thing and just working and working, but never
Yeah.
taking any money yourself.
Well, and as you know,
So,
the owner always gets paid last.
yes, yes, I do agree with that. So, do you have any big plans, I guess, in the shop? Anything changing? Any big plans to start a show, go on Whatnot, anything like that?
We do the big Shipshawana show. I do that, and then he'll have one local with it. There's three at Shipshawana, one local. That's the only one I do, just because of the time factor. And right now we are so busy that it's hard to break into something new. I was just telling somebody today I bought a coin collection, a big coin collection from a buddy about 8 weeks ago. It was a family estate, and I barely touched that thing. I can't even get it to the floor because I don't have the time. And we got people lining up in here some days just selling sport cards to us. It's just booming.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is. It is really booming, and I totally understand for everything you're taking on, you almost need to hire another employee,
Correct.
kind of like we touched on to handle that. And then speaking of the Shipshawana show, Brad and Ryan, card collector too, they just did the one in Columbus, the Card Fest. I actually did another show that I regularly do instead of going over to that show, but that show was a huge success. I know Brad does quality shows. I've done the one in Grove City, Ohio, that he puts on, and yeah, he's really good show promoter for sure. So I plan to do some of his shows in the future.
Yeah.
So this is the last question, and it's about the future. Do you, and because I don't know very many shop owners that do, but do you have a plan to retire or to pass the business along to family members or anything like that?
Probably to some degree, I will probably never retire, and never is a ways off, but right now it's so much fun. And that's one thing about this business is I can say, and they say, if you love what you do, you won't work a day in your life. And that's where I'm at. I love
Mhm.
this business. I love my help. I love the hobby. And, with all the other things I got going on, my help really picks it up for me. So I got a son who's 15 that he's talked about it. He's done some eBay and that, just teach him a little bit about it. But he's a big sport guy when it comes to playing, and then he's getting a little bit into the gambling online and everything. But he just has a lot to learn. But he's very, very young, and he's not the diehard pack ripper or nothing when it comes to that. And he's not even favorite player. He was a big Chiefs fan when he was little, and Patrick Mahomes, and I kind of picked that up where I was always a Colts guy, still am, but he moved on from that, and now he's a Bears guy, and but so are my son-in-laws. He loves Notre Dame, and so we'll see where that goes. There's a lot to learn, and I'm not getting any younger. Someday I need to pass the torch.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. So again, I really do appreciate you coming on here and making time. I know, as a shop owner, you're extremely busy. So I do appreciate it, and I think there's some stuff there that'll be good for others who are interested in a shop or interested in, a baseball card
Right.
type business.